There are so many things that go into making a video game special. For me, I really enjoy level design. Level design is so cool because you take the core concept of your game and build a world around it. So if you have a game like a platformer, you're going to have a lot of platforms, enemies, moving things. You're going to have goals and objectives that you need to splice out all over the world. You have a game like Call of Duty or Counter-Strike or whatever, where the levels are all going to be based around cover and making sure the players have good sight lines of other players and they can hold cover and hold their ground and kind of defend whatever areas they need to defend. But then there's games like Tony Hawk, where technically it's a platformer, technically it's a sports game, but the level design is built 100% around physics. And I think that's what makes Tony Hawk extremely special. The development team had an internal nickname for it called Tony Hawkitecture. Similar to architecture, you Tony Hawkify the world around you. Buildings are ramps, handrails are actual skate rails, the sidewalks are ledges, planters in the middle of the roads, make them quarter pipes. Broken down truck, put a kicker on it. Everything is skatable in Tony Hawk. They sometimes take an actual skate park too, and then adapt it into Tony Hawk. You would think that a real-life skate park might translate to Tony Hawk really well, but in actuality, there are a lot of differences from the real-life locations to the actual skate parks. Now, I happen to be from Portland, Oregon, so I had the opportunity to go to Burnside in real life and had a good look around, took a few photos of the park, and wanted to compare side by side between Tony Hawk and the real-life Burnside, just to see how accurate it really is. Now, there were people skating, even though I went there really early in the morning. I didn't really want to take videos of them skating or have their faces in there, so there's only going to be photos of the park in this video. I'm going to be comparing it specifically to the ReTHAWed version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1's map, because it uses the same geometry even though it may use different textures. It's just much higher fidelity than the PS1 original, even though the PS1 original does have more accurate graphics to the 35th anniversary repainting of Burnside that happened before I was able to take these photos. So all the graffiti that would be seen in ReTHAWed and the 1+2 remake are not there in real life currently. But these parks do get tagged up. It's likely to get painted once again, and it will look more like it did in that one Grayson Fletcher clip. The first one I find very interesting. It's the roll-in where you start. This is just the roll-in where you spawn. You can see that it has two vert walls on either side of you when you spawn in. But in real life, it's more like an L-shaped ramp. There's this little bump off on one side that's kind of a bit of a roll-in into the bowl to the side of you, where in the video game, the ramp is pushed really far back with a straight, narrow path that leads you straight forward, and then the skate bowl is off to the side. But in real life, the skate bowl is basically touching that ramp. This one's not the easiest to tell what's going on, but you can see from the pillar there's a ramp that flows into the bowl, but in the video game, both in the original and in the remake, it is just a harsh transition. It's a vert wall, big flat, then the bowl, where in reality it's a roll into the bowl. Another kind of interesting thing is that there's this fence that goes all the way around the park in the game. You know, that's just there, kind of show the player the boundary of the map. But these little barricades, they were never there in real life. They never have been. And you can also tell how thin the decks of the ramps actually are. The deck is the top half of the ramp, if you didn't know that. The deck is really thin on the real life park, but in the video game, they're really thick, and they added these diagonal barriers all over the place to kind of guide some rails and some grinds for the player, even though one of them just kind of shoots you off into a fence for some reason. the bowl in the back half of the park is basically the same as it is in real life. But what's really interesting about this here is that there's a ledge that goes all the way across in the game. Okay, yeah, in real life, there's a ramp that juts out, and then the wall is recessed back. So these two are not completely level with each other, but they are in the video game. You can also see the wall in the back that says 35 years and the Stumptown wall. They're meant to be the same wall, but in the video game, it's really low, and I'm not sure why. And then compared to the original map, it's the exact same thing. It's just that in the ReTHAWed version, they have the graffiti that was there just before the repaint. If we turn our heads from the bowl, though, you can see through the park and kind of see under the bridge structure. Everything's basically the same, but in real life, there is no fence there. There's actually this extra pipe, which is technically the entrance into the park. You go down this little path that leads up to the bowl. Well, in the original map and in the remake, there's just a little side alley between the parking garage and the actual skate park. In ReTHAWed, the modders added in this extra little full pipe in the back, but the flow of the ramps are still lined up, so this pipe is this weird anomaly in the ReTHAWed version of the map. It's not there in real life, even though it technically is, because the ramp there that says Shorties is where the ramp would be in real life too, but then there would be a little like roll-up ramp that leads into the pool in the back rather than just a spine transfer here. So doing a little extra research, I went and browsed the Burnside Skatepark Facebook page and found a bunch of photos of the park from a while ago, and it looks like this whole roll-in area was actually constructed in about 2015. So the whole pipe and everything wasn't ever there to begin with. That is a new construction. So the video game versus the current park, definitely you're going to look a little different. You can even see that the fence that goes around the park used to be there. You can also see that the little ledge that's on the hip is protruding in the video game, but in real life, there's just a ledge in between the hip, and one half of the hip is a little taller than the other, but there's no straight ledge. You don't run into anything like you do in the game. There's also this middle kicker part, which is kind of interesting, because if you look at it in real life, it almost looks like a quarter. It is technically a spine. It's really mellow, surprisingly, even though it's like almost 3 or 4 feet tall. But in the video game, it's maybe like a foot tall, and it's just this tiny little kicker without a coping on it. And in the original game, it's just even more obviously a kicker. It doesn't look anything like the real-life counterpart. And then in this shot, you can really tell from this photo that the bowl is a completely different shape on the top, but it's basically the same thing. They have it in a very similar spot. The only real difference is that the pool coping isn't there. It's just kind of a concrete ledge in the game. And then there's the side half of the park. So this is like the entrance to the park, or a little side section of the park. This is how I personally walked into the park. You can see that there's this whole ramp that leads into the bowl, and kind of like the park is a little bit more raised from the ground, but in the video game, it's just flat to the ground. There's no spining in, there's no ramps that lead into it. There's this like dedicated truck parking to this Long Live the Wild Cards building. You can see that the full banner's there in the video game. But if you look at the remake does a much better job at representing the bridge from the original. Overall, I would say that the park is maybe like a 7 out of 10 accurate. It's got most of the things that are there in real life, and in fact, it has some extra little stuff like the ledges here. But more or less, it's the same park. It looks like it, it feels like it. The only real difference is that a lot of stuff is moved a little further apart than they are in real life to make room for the fact that Tony Hawk is a fast-paced game. The skater is moving fast. They need the extra room so the skater doesn't just immediately hit a ramp before the camera turns around. But did you know that Tony Hawk wasn't the only game Burnside was featured in? That's right, there's another PlayStation 1 skateboarding game called Grind Session. And this game also has Burnside in it. Look, you could even play as Burnside! Okay, we're gonna make this one more of a lightning round because I don't want to keep comparing all the same photos. There's not that many differences between this version of the park compared to Tony Hawk. However, the opening section of the map is a little bit more accurate in this game than it is to Tony Hawk. However, the roll-in does not exist at all. It's just a flat. They also don't include any extra geometry in this map, so whatever you see is in real life is all that you get. There's no extra ledges here. And it's very interesting to me to see this. If you look at the left side of the park here in Grind Session, they actually removed a little bit more of the map than Tony Hawk did. Tony Hawk still had the little path behind the fun box here. It just led to a spine transfer instead of the opening to the ramp up to the pool. But in Grind Session, they just don't have it at all. They just put a fence there. At the very least, Grind Session's got the fun box right with the 2 sizes of the ramps. They don't even have the building off to the side anymore. It's just an empty lot, where in real life, that is a parking garage. Granted, my photos are also from 2025, so I don't know if that's going to make that big of a difference from when these games came out in 99. But regardless, Grind Session does the same thing with the spine ramp in the middle of the park. It's just a kicker, and it's even more obviously a kicker in this game than it is in Tony Hawk. The only thing that's more accurate about it is that it doesn't do that little split that it does in Tony Hawk. It's just a straight line down like it is in real life. Alright, I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully you thought this was mildly interesting to compare. I won't be able to do this with everything else in real life, with my own photos, but I might have the ability to use Google Photos, or if any of you guys can DM me photos of real life locations in the Tony Hawk games on my TikTok or Instagram, @Screwlip or @ScrewlipClips, and like and subscribe for more.